Today we're here with Joshua Mattison, DC team member and the big winner of the ProQuest Season 3 event at Fable Hobby in Portland, Oregon, USA this last weekend. He's here today to run us through his event, share his list, and then give us some tips and tricks on winning with the Dirty Ice Queen. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey folks, welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. That's right, for the interview of our good buddy Joshua, no stranger to the channel, but this time taking down the big PQ win. Congratulations, man.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to finally be able to take down something like one of these.
Yeah, you've had some top eights and stuff before, but always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But it's your time. Okay. So yeah, what the plan for tonight? I'm going to ask you a little bit about why you chose what you chose. Then we're going to run through your event and then close out with your deck list and any advice you have for somebody else who wants to do what you just did. So yeah, first question. You've been on here multiple times for Bravo before. Why'd you switch? Why'd you bail?
Yeah, when Uprising was coming out, I saw Iyslander and I thought, this hero looks really cool and probably not good. And I just think I have a poor sense of evaluating heroes when we first see them. Because I was super wrong about Iyslander. She's really good. But I picked up the deck because there's a Ethnic Smoke, a YouTuber up from Seattle, who took Iyslander to top 8 in Calling Singapore when Prism was still in the meta, which was Icelander's worst matchup, and it made me go, okay, this deck isn't just cool, it's like probably secretly good. And so I just started playing it. He released a ton of videos that are really great, and it just helped up my game. And it's just really fun. It makes you learn a lot about the game, and that's what I look for in a deck, is I want it to teach me something. Bravo taught me a lot about how to pitch your cards, how to interact with your opponent with blocking and attacking, like valuing them. And Iyslander teaches you a lot about how you interact with instant speed in the game. You know, the stack really matters for her. And that's really great. I think as heroes go, I haven't played Bravo since Road to National season because he's good, but I think he's just not going to get much better without serious support. He's just too fair. Oldhim is probably the better Guardian overall, even though his game plan is different. And I just really enjoy Iyslander.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what's your take on the... we saw Battle Hardened Leeds, which was Wall of Ice, right? I think it was probably getting it wrong, but it was like 5-3 or something like that, Iyslander, Oldhim, or something like that, right? So
the whole thing was just those two heroes.
Right.
I think that's probably pretty reasonable, to be honest. I think Oldhim has started to really tech for Fi. I think Iyslander can completely win that matchup, even if it is difficult. And I think that as you see good Iyslander pilots, that it becomes a way harder game to win. The thing going into the season I kept hearing people talk about was that Iyslander was a powerful deck, but hard to play. And I think that's 100% right. And then but like the Battle Hardened, you saw a ton of like talented players playing it. I think as people get time with the deck and they really start to understand how it plays, it'll be a more dominant force. It's just not as easy to pick up as past meta-defining decks like Fi with Stubbies or just Fi, or Redline Briar or Chane have been. And Chane was a more difficult one. I think Iyslander has more intricacies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. So why don't you walk us through your event? So it was just shy of 60 people, right?
61.
There was it's over 60. Okay, so it's 61. And so that's automatically 6 rounds with top 8 cut. Mm-hmm. So how'd the day start?
Day started really great, honestly. I played Daniel, who was on Dorinthea. He was playing the Spice. He was playing Quicksilver Dagger Cintauri Saber, which was really cool to see. We had a conversation. He was like, I've been playing a bunch of stuff. And I said, I just want to play something cool. I don't want to just play something other people have... Him and his friend have both been working on interesting builds. And it's like, if I want to play the game and do well, I want to know that like their secret spice was kind of what got them there. And I dig that. I'm going to school to be a a teacher right now, and Daniel is a teacher himself. So we had a really great conversation about going into the field of teaching. They gave me some really great advice, and they were a real pleasure to play. I was able to win that match, and it was a really good game. I just found my power cards, and although the Saber dagger is spicy and interesting, I think it has a worse matchup than Iyslander.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's the more it tries to go wide, the worse it is for Iyslander, right? So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Moving on to the second round, my opponent was Jimmy, who has been in the area for a little while now. They are a really nice person. They've been playing Lexi and Iyslander, and they were on Iyslander on the day. So we played the mirror, and that is probably one of the hardest Iyslander matchups because you have to really think about things in that game. When I was talking about like stack earlier, like this is the game where like your stack triggers absolutely need to be perfect. You have to pay attention to what each one represents. And we played the game really well. He had some different tech than I did. He ran 3 Sigil of Solaces. He got all 3 off, which was really scary. He was running the Sigil of Permafrost, going for the play the defense reaction to buff your Arcane to make Frosties and kill you off the Frost hexes. But I was able to layer some triggers to stop his combo from impacting me. The turn I went to, I played a card, Aether Icebane Fused. I played an Aether Icebane Fused on my turn. They responded by playing their Ice Eternal from Arsenal, something along those lines. They responded. I had chill triggers that they were responding to, so they did that. I did something else. I could be misremembering this, but at a certain point, they went to pop their Striders, and I had my Amulet of Ice up, so I was waiting onto it. As soon as they pop Striders, I pop Amulet of Ice. So that goes on the stack before the Striders can resolve. So before they can do an instant speed wizard non-attack, they have to pay for the Amulet of Ice. So that's one of those things where it's like you have to look at your triggers and go, how am I going to basically use these to screw my opponent the most? And Amulet of Ice is like one of those huge power cards you need to pay attention to, because instant speed is great, but like in the mirror, when you're both playing at it, instant speed doesn't resolve until your opponent says it resolves. Like I can do, and so that was what kind of got me there. They busted their Storm Striders, and when an Iyslander breaks their Storm Striders and doesn't win the game, they're at a massive disadvantage. So played really well. I just had some, things go my way, some good triggers. Another tip for that matchup, like we'll talk about that, I suppose, later, is that Illuvian Constellus is like also one of the most important cards in the matchup, and you just need to not give your opponent incidental value off of it. Yeah. And then round 3 was into fellow Team DC familiar face Billy on Viserai. He is a really great deck pilot, and he's really into Viserai. He's one of those people who it's like, I don't normally so Viserai is in one of Iyslander's better matchups, and Viserai's like worst matchup is probably Iyslander. So I was happy to see it, but I was also unhappy that it was Billy, because I know he's always brewing and always thinking about ways to make that better. It went pretty well for me though. There's a lot of great things happening for Iyslander. One of the things is you play Illuvian Constellus in that matchup because they throw so much single source Arcane that it's massive value. And I was just able to stop them. They didn't see a lot of Mavrian Skies, which was also pretty huge. They weren't able to throw a lot of Go Again at me, so yeah, I was able to get them there off the Striders play.
I do want to note for the stream, Billy's like probably one of the best Viserai players out there. I feel very confident in saying that. So, yeah, but that's a tough match.
He's loyal to that deck, like that's the thing about Viserai. He's like Dory or Azalea. Those are decks that have like these pilots who are like, I'm never going to stop playing this deck, and I'm always going to find the weird combo or weird new trick that's good. It's kind of scary when you find somebody who's good. And this kind of actually leads into round 4, because you talk about like people who are dedicated to decks, and like even though they're kind of a meme, if somebody's good at them, they can be like secretly really hard matchups. Is I played into Jacob, who is on Boltyn, and like I was sitting down 3-0, and they tell me my opponent is a Boltyn, and I go, oh, cool, Boltyn. And I go, wait, 3-0? Okay. Like, that's something I should... They got here for a reason. Boltyn's not easy to win with. So I sat down. They flipped up the Sabers, which was what I figured they would do. Raiden, Boltyn has... I mean, Boltyn just has a rough matchup in Iyslander, specifically because of the card Hypothermia. That can just ruin their entire game plan. They were able to get to their combo before I could find a Hypothermia, but I was able to present enough disruption to make it impactful. They went for a so they started by breaking Courage, breaking Gallantry Gold, so it's pretty heads up what the turn is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
They play via the Vanguard, charging once. They only have like 4 cards in Soul, maybe 3. So I already know, like, okay, they're not going to have the strongest turn if they go for it. They Beacon of Victory, get the other get their first Lumina, and then I don't respond. Beacon of Victory again. No, at that point I play a Blizzard that I've been holding back, wanting to see what they have in hand and are able to represent. They pay through it and are able to start swinging the swords, but I just start blocking them because they only have 2 cards in Soul, 2 or 3 cards in Soul. They can only swing the sword 3 times. So I know they can swing 3 times. I only have to stop 1 hit. So I block with a piece of equipment and a card from hand on both of them, and then take the last swing. They gain 1 life, and I am like really in a great position to win that game from there. But it was a close game. They played extremely well, and like it was no joke, honestly. Like, they're a really great Boltyn player, and that's one of those things. For somebody who's dedicated to a deck, you can get there with it. Yeah. So, really quick before we move on to round 5, do you care if I go take something out of the oven real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. My timer just went off, and I almost forgot about that. Be right back.
Right,
all right, I'm ready.
So you're 4-0 going into round 5.
Yeah, which is huge. At this point, we've done I did the math on like what records look like. I need to be 5-1 to be for sure. And then there's going to be like a bajillion 4-2s who are all like trying their hardest to make it in. And I just want to avoid that situation as much as possible. I do not want to be 4-2 going into hoping to get top 8. So I am playing into Taylor, who came up from Corvallis, the Kraken card crew. They were also on Bravo in the past. I played them at the Battle Harden where they were on Viserai before. Taylor's a super nice guy, really passionate player, really smart player, very kind. They were on Dash. This was my first Dash of the day, and it was a really tight match. They got to start, and they started with a second Teclo Pounder, which is one of those things that...
Oh, so he went
normally
boost. Interesting.
He went boost. And a lot of dashes, I feel like, do go boost because they can be kind of modular with how they do it. They have so many blues that if they... It's tricky. If they banish too many blues, then, yeah, their end game is kind of, like, rough. But I think boost is actually not bad into Iyslander, especially with the addition of Teclo Pounder. Not Teclo Pounder, Pulse Wave Harpoon.
Mm-hmm.
The Harpoon says, like, if they can get to, like, Chain Link 3, they can strip a Wounded Bull, because it only has to be a block 2 card. Or they can strip pretty much any of our attacks that we want. They aren't likely going to get to Chain Link 4, because we always have some... not always, but we usually have some form of disruption, so they don't get there too often, but it is totally reasonable for them to Pulse Wave you for 3 and steal a power card. Some of the interesting things you can do this matchup is show them, like, Amulet of Ices. And it's like, sorry, it doesn't block, haha. But, like, it's actually one of the harder aggro matches. Dash plays blues. She gets to play AB3 for free, where the other decks, like Briar and Phi, have to find ways to fit Arcane Barrier in, and Phi is only ever going to really run 1 into Iyslander. Because paying for Icelander's Arcane is, like, a losing strategy for Phi. Whereas for Dash, like, it just pays for items later, so they can just, if they get items on the board like pistols, like, you're kind of screwed. They can just start assembling Voltron, and you're, like, on a time clock. But Teclo Pounder is also a time clock. Taylor got 2 out, and, like, we've had this discussion before, like, during the Team Cup, we were talking about them, and I made the point that I like to see 2 early, because that usually means I can burn them out. If you see 2 as an Iyslander player, that's great, because my disruption is often enough to stop them from doing more than attack, maybe pistol. And if they go throttle for 10 and like that's it, like if you told me your opponent, like who's going for like a really big aggro turn, like attacked you for 10 or 12 damage, it's like, well, that's just kind of a medium turn. That's not like that great, right? So that's the goal, is like burn out those Teklo Pounders. Once the first 2 are gone, hope they don't find the third. And Taylor actually did find the third. It was a really tight game, and I was trying to get them to Strider's range. They found the third one. They took the risk of playing it, which I think was 100% right, especially considering where we were in the game, because it put me on a clock. They essentially got free 2 damage on anything they wanted to boost when I was at like 10 or less life. And the final turn of the game came down to, I had arsenaled a red Aether Ice Vein, thinking, okay, I'll block and maybe do this on my turn. If they present a situation that I can kill them, I'll Striders on their turn. They were at 8 life, which for Aether Ice Vein is the perfect threshold of I can kill you if you have no resources. The problem is they were holding 2 cards, so it doesn't matter what color they are, as long as they can pay for AB1. I can't kill them. I can only do 7 damage because you do Aether Ice Vein for 5, Waning Moon for 3. So he was able to lock down the game. I was able, I think I had a no block in hand, so it was like, okay, I have to block you out on the first attack, and then whatever it is that comes out afterwards, I can't block. So he played that really well, really smart. That's one of those matchups that always comes down to like low life totals. That's common with Iyslander, but like Dash is one of those ones where it's like, oh, this is actually close. It's not just because I want to be at a similar life total to you. But yeah, props to Taylor. Very good player. Who did make it to top 8, which was awesome. He went on to play Justin and won for round 6, so they had a 5-1 record. No, he lost to Justin. But he had a 5-1 record going to top 8, so that was awesome. My 6th round opponent was another Taylor. I was not familiar with this Taylor before, but they were a very like cool person and a very skilled Dash pilot. Like, you know, when you sit down from an opponent and they've got like the Nitro Mechanoid mat, they've got the foreign language cold foil full art Dash, like, and it's like the signed mat and everything. You're like, oh, this guy likes Dash. They're going to be a good Dash player. Like Taylor was 100% a good Dash player. Where Taylor, round 5 opponent Taylor started with a Teklo Pounder. Round 6 Taylor started with the Induction Chamber. Mm-hmm. And what I really liked about that was it provided him a lot more value over the course of the game. Even though I was able to win in this match, like I think overall it provided more utility and like more windows for him to win. This game just happened to go my way. He found a Teklo Pounder early too, so he was getting good value. This game was one of the it was the second game in a row where I found Channel Lake Frigid turn 1 where I go first. No, first game where this happened. I go first, found Channel Lake Frigid turn 1. So I throw that out, which is great. I'm telling you, you don't get to play the game like to your full extent for like 2 turns. And then the whole thing was with Dash, you have to play KG because both decks, Iyslander and Dash, can pivot their strategies mid-game, and it's a completely viable strategy. You really have to just read your opponent and find out what kind of player they are, because they both have different ways to win the game, and both kind of work. So I had to sit and watch. He has AB3 because they just get to play for free with the Visiertronic and the boots. And he was pitching efficiently, but I didn't feel like he was trying to fatigue me. They just seemed like he always had the blue when he needed to pay for an Ice Vein. But I was chipping in damage, and we got to the point where I was able to get him off of a Strider's play, but it was a very just tight game. You know, like Taylor really made me sweat for it. He really made me work hard. But I was able to take that one down. So I ended Swiss with a 5-1 record, which was great. So I know I'm in for sure. So I could kind of take a breather, relax, talk to some buddies. I went outside, got a beer with somebody there. I was going outside with, and Dylan was like, oh, I'm going to get a beer. I was like, oh, cool. Where are you going? He's like, my car. Do you want one? I was like, sure. So that's always nice to have like a little beer break in between. And then that was great. So then we go into top 8. And my opponent is somebody else who's been on the channel, Jacob, who played Briar and is now on Rhinar. Very cool dude. They had a bunch of chicken strips that somebody brought him, and he very kindly shared some of his chicken strips with me, which was great after a long day of Swiss. To be, yeah, here you go. Because I was kidding around with him. I was like, you give me one of those strips, I'll throw the game. It's fine, you know. But no, they were super nice. They gave me some of their food, and like they were on Rhinar, which is another interesting matchup. That's the other one where they get to play Arcane Barrier 3 for free because they have the Skullhorn, and it's like when decks get to just play that and not lose value, that's just like really, that's good for them. It's kind of rough for Iyslander. But that being said, like I don't think Rhinar is actually that bad of a matchup. You'll hear a lot of Iyslander players or Rhinar players kind of talk about it as if like, oh, it's Rhinar favored. And I think I disagree, especially if you're playing like the Boltyn list. You just make them block a lot of damage, and if you make them block damage, then your arcane damage hits them on their turn. Or if they don't block the damage and try to swing back at you, well, they just took 8 to 13 damage because you either had Bull or you had go again into Wounded Bull. And that's the whole plan with Iyslander is just like we're going to both lose life at a pretty equal rate. And then by the time you're at 8 life, the game's over because I get an extra turn. This game started because this game started with me having Chandelier Frigid on turn 1 again. I was a higher seed, so I got to choose to go first, which is great. Into Rhinar, like the number one tip is don't let them go first because if they draw like anything that intimidates, like barraging beatdown, it sucks. They just take your cards. You're already at lower life. Not fun. But I was able to go first. Huge advantage. And they were playing Club, not Claws, which I think is generally the choice. It's the one that I think is a little better in Iyslander just because of hypothermia.
Swinging once seems better than trying to swing twice, yeah.
Right, yeah. It's like you were saying with Dory, like going wide into Iyslander is kind of difficult. I have disruption. Don't let me do it. I can't remember too many details of the matchup outside of like it was just like very. I mean, he's a really good Rhinar player. Like he got into top 8 like because he's good, and it was like really. It's my first Rhinar of the day, and it was just like really interesting seeing what was going on there. I was able to take it down and moved on to top 4, where I played into my round 6 opponent again, Taylor, who was able to make it in on the 4 record after our game in round 6, which was really awesome to see. They made it into top 8 just on that, on the cusp. And then they like made it into top 4. So it was like, heck yeah, that rules. And you always love to see it when it's like, it's happened to me before. Where you're like, oh man, am I going to make it? And then you make it and you're actually like, you're a contender. This is great. Kicking butt. Taylor's a super good player. And this game was like way more stressful than our first game. The first game, it just felt like they were pitching incidentally blues to stop damage. This game felt like they were like, I think I'm going to fatigue you because they have enough. They can do it. Their cards block 3. There's like no block 2s unless they run like Tome of Find. And he didn't, so he was just blocking 3. And it's like, oh boy. So I'm chipping damage. My whole goal is like rapidly switching because this is that thing where like, oh, I can't just try to like tempo you through the game. I have to get at least a Frost Hex out because if I don't, I lose. And I had blocked early, I think with 2 Ice Eternals. So I only had 1 left in deck. I was like, okay, well, we got to play for that a little bit. So I got a Frost Hex out. I got an Insidious Chill out. And I might have had an Amulet of Ice. So it was this thing of, okay, I just have to hope for the value and just play for it. And this was probably this was my favorite game, honestly, of the whole tournament. Because he was playing so tight. He was stopping so much damage. He was like very cagey in a way that was like, it's frustrating. I'd leave him with 2 cards and they'd swing at me for like 6. And it's like, well, I have to respect that because you took damage than I did. And if I take 6, that's actually like pretty bad. What came down to is the final turn where they pitch their only card to play, I think their Arsenal card, leaving them with 1 resource floating coming in for 6 damage. I had Emeritus Goldian Arsenal, Tunic resource up, 4 blues, one of which is an Ice Eternal. So my play, after I did all the math to make sure there was no way they could, like screw me out of it if I like messed up, was Tunic resource, paying for the Stormstriders to play Ice Eternal for 4 resources, making 2 Frostbites. They take 1 of the 2 damage. The Frostbites resolve, so they can no longer do anything sneaky and without resources anyways. They have 1 Frost Hex, so they're at like 10 or 9, which is just outside of like Emeritus on its own. Emeritus on its own is 4 plus 3 off the moon, so I had to have more damage. So I did that for 2 damage, Emeritus for 4, Waning Moon for 3, and then 1 more off the Frost Hex finished it off. But it was like this thing of like, I haven't really had to like instant out an Ice Eternal for such low value before. But you really have to like always look at your cards, look at your hand and go like, okay, can I kill you right now? Is this worth it? And that's the thing about Iyslander is you always have to be thinking about what can my opponent have? Do I have lethal right now? And you have to sit there and do math, which is the least fun part is the math. And then my final was into Nathan, who was playing Rhinar. And he was on Claws, which I, like they have a good grasp of the deck. I really don't know as much about Rhinar, but they're a solid Rhinar player. And our match was great. Some things went wrong for them that really helped me seal the deal. I play a single Channel the Blink Expanse because I feel that there are enough decks in the format that it's a good tech card. And in this matchup, it lined up perfectly. On my turn, I played a Cold Snap to freeze their arsenal unless they paid 1. And they paid 1, which made me go, oh, you care about your arsenal, which in my mind made me think Bloodrush Bellow. And then I played an attack. No, what I played was the Aether Ice Vein, and I fused it. And then arsenaled the card they didn't see, which was the Channel the Bleak Expanse. I don't remember exactly how I did everything. It was something along those lines, but they didn't see the Channel the Bleak Expanse. And sure enough, they go for Bloodrush Bellow, and Channel the Bleak Expanse just shut it off. And that was really great. And on top of shutting it off, their card they pitched to Bloodrush Bellow was a Beast Within, which knocked a Bloodrush Bellow, an Oasis Respite, and then a Command and Conquer off the top. So they lost 2 of their power cards for the matchup being, they're like, oh, I lost 3 life, and I lost my Oasis, and I lost 1 of my Blood Rushes, which is like, that's how you win the game. And then, they just came in for Claw into Erase Face, which, I mean, I blocked the Claw, took the Erase Face, lost my Channel, the Bleak Expanse, but by that point, it had done its job, so I was like, I didn't care to see it go. And then they just kept getting red clumps for a turn or 2. So I came in for like a red Aether Ice Vein. They pitched 3 reds to AB3 it and then discarded their last card. And so like I had freebies. There were some things that I did in this matchup that he kind of pointed out were different than he anticipated, which was that I think Iyslander players who might not understand the deck think that they should be arsenaling a blue every turn. And that's not necessarily true. So say I sat down across from him and I go, I want to pressure you, and my hand is E-Strike, 2 cards, Wounded Bull. I'm absolutely going to go E-Strike 5, go again, pay 3, Wounded Bull, no arsenal. That's too good a value to like not do it. Because like, okay, it's 13 damage. If they don't block all of it and they take damage, awesome. If they do block all of it, like, okay, yeah, you might have been able to do like 3 Arcane and chip them down, but like, what else are you going to do? Arsenal the Wounded Bull and come in for E-Strike for 7 or something like that, and that's, I don't know.
Oh, it makes sense. It's just math.
It's just math, right? That's the thing. And like listening to Michael Hamilton talk about the deck really kind of makes you understand like, oh, sometimes you just have to be the aggressor, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're always going for that arsenal play. It just means what's the best math? And it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do 13 damage because that's a lot. And your hand's not going to block that much. So you're either going to give me armor or you're going to take damage, which is what I did multiple turns. I started turn 0, and that's what I did. E-Strike into Bull. Because, like, I'm losing cards, but it's worth it. They took 2 damage, which isn't, like, you're like, oh, you gave them 2 power cards to do 2 damage. It's like, yeah, but normally I wouldn't do any damage on turn 0. I don't know. Maybe I was being greedy, but it ended up working out for me. Oh, there's one other comment, actually. I want to go back to... there was something I forgot about Jacob in my top 8. He was also playing Rhinar. Turn 0 of that game was also interesting, because I played Amulet of Ice, go to pass, they play a Sigil of Solace, gaining 3 life. I still have my action point, so they have. I don't remember. They had 2. They'd lost 2 cards from hand. I did something to get another card from them, so they only have 2 cards in hand at the moment. I see that they play the Sigil, and I go, okay, Wounded Bull for 8. Like, you have 2 cards, you're going to take 2 damage. Your Sigil automatically lost value, which was like a really lucky lineup thing. That was just an interesting play that happened that game. But like, he's a really good player. I just got really lucky to have like the exact card to punish him for that play. But other from that, that's my tournament. I was able to get there. Nathan, all of my opponents were like incredibly nice people, incredibly good players. That was something I kept saying throughout the day, was like, just really happy to be able to play in this community. It's full of like incredibly nice people who are incredibly good at the game.
Nice. All right, well, let's go ahead and bring up that deck, and I'll go ahead and read down it. Now, I do want to point out for those watching, you have an interesting sideboard set up that you sent over, which we can obviously speak to. And what I've done is I've tried to highlight the sideboard primary cards in italics. So I have Aether Ice Fiend red, E-Strike, Findell's red, makes sense, Scar red, Sink Below, and then Wounded Bull red, right? So all your big math power cards there. Yellow Aether Ice Veins, and then here's the blue list. Aether Hail, Aether Ice Vein, Amulet of Ice, 2 Blizzards, 3 Brain Freezes, 3 Brothers in Arms, that card's super cool, 3 CLFs, Channel Lake Frigid, 1 Channel the Bleak Expanse, as you mentioned, 3 Cold Snaps, 2 Emeritus Scoldings, 2 Epots, Energy Potions, 3 Frost Hex, 3 Frosting, that's the 0 for 1, 3 Hypothermias, 3 Ice Bolts, 3 Ice Eternals, 3 Insidious Chills, 3 Polar Blasts, and 2 Winter's Bites. Running the Waning Moon, and only the Waning Moon, because is there any other weapon? And then we have, as you said, the Alluvion Constella's Coronet Peak, Crown of Providence, Final Spring Tunic, the Ironhide Gauntlet, Metacarpus Nodes, makes sense, Nullrune Hood, and then Storm Striders. You got a hat rack for all that equipment? That's the question.
Oh yeah.
All right, so can you, before we go through some specific cards, can you kind of explain the larger sideboard, right? I think your main deck is like 30 some odd cards. Let me pull it up. It's 43 main cards in the deck, or in the main deck, and then you're straight up on sideboard there. So that's got a lot of various tech. So can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. I'll start by just saying, like, this deck is largely Michael Hamilton's list. Because he's just...
Because why not?
Smart.
I mean...
He's just smarter than me, and I'm okay with that. I avoided playing it for so long, and then before the Team Cup, I just went through it, and like his deck is so good. I've just made some tweaks. So the sideboard, Scar for a Scar, comes out. That's something that like I've come to through like Natan. It comes out for only certain matchups. Like Oldham plays Stalagmite into like so many matchups right now that if they play it into you, it's a massive punish to go Scar for a Scar red, and then they go, okay, block. Now you're like Wounded Bull costs 4. For Iyslander, that pretty much stops what's going on unless you have a Tunic resource or you're willing to give up your Arsenal card and then just have 2 floating to like do nothing with, which is like pretty rude. It's not good into the mirror because you both start at 36 life, and like there's like 0 for 4 is fine, but there's better things that you can be doing in the mirror. It's probably not great into Kano because he's at 30 and their game plan is pretty much like, I don't care what my life total is. It can be as low as you'd like. I can still win the game. So I don't really love it there. But one thing that's nice about it, at least in Kano, is it's a 0 for 4. So you're committing absolutely nothing to it. I just think that there's better things you could be doing there as well. Other from that, it's like great into like pretty much everything else. Like I don't think there's anywhere else I'm cutting it. Like 0 for 4 go again into any of your power cards is just really rude. If you've never been on the other end of like Scar for a Scar red Aether Ice Vein, like you don't want to be. That is rude. Scar for a Scar Wounded Bull, rude. Scar for a Scar Fighting Spirit, rude. Scar for a Scar Coronet Peak, still rude. It's all just not fun. That's the gist on that. Sink Below is they're for like mostly the grindy matchups.
Mm-hmm.
I know you probably play this into aggro matchups, and I know Hamilton lists he does. But like in aggro, Scar for Scar kind of feels bad because if your plan is to keep tempo with
You mean
them,
you mean sink below?
Scar for Scar, Sink Below.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sink Below is kind of you're trying to keep tempo. Sink Below is not really keeping tempo. It's just like tempo neutral. It just says I'm blocking and maybe filtering. Whereas a block 3 that does something is probably a little better. Sometimes like the Scar for Scar is good. Sorry, Sink Below is good in Defy because of Snatch, Mounting Anger, and Blaze Headlong. You play it into aggro, absolutely, but like not every aggro deck, not into Dash for on hits don't exist. Like there's Combustible Courier, but that comes in for 6 most of the time, and if it isn't coming in for 6, you could probably stop it without a Sink Below. But other from that, I don't care about any of the other on hits. You can have Dominate on your high speed impact, sure, that's fine. But it's good for Guardian. It's good for Dory. Like, it's absolutely good for Dory. Dory can be, like, really hard if the pilot's good, so having defense reactions is fine. And that's a matchup where it's like, if Sink Below goes in Arsenal, still good. That's really good. You'd prefer it to be there. Like, but it's just one of those ones, you don't want it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, into Dromai, you're trying to, like, go fast. So Sink Below, get out of here. And then let's see here. I keep every Ice Vein in all the time because that card's like such a power card.
Yeah. How about Blizzard? So 2 Blizzards, that's in your sideboard.
Yep. So Blizzard is one of those cards that just doesn't do everything. It doesn't do anything in every matchup. It doesn't do something in every matchup.
Mm-hmm.
In some matchups, it's great. Like into Vi, like you don't have a lot of ways to stop them normally with like the Go Again because Hypothermia only hits like non-natural Go Again. Vi is like 90 natural Go Again.
Yep.
But this is really great because if they go Belittle, showing you, something, you go, okay, great. In response, before you search, you can tax them.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't get their Minnowism to pay for it first, which means like, okay, give me another card from your hand or it's going to lose Go Again. That's really mean play. It's not good into Guardian, really. It doesn't block and they can pay through that tax pretty well. And sometimes they just don't care. Like they've got a pummel. I didn't really want to go on this rouse. I wanted to pummel you. It's really good into the aggro decks. It's really great into Dromai. I mean, it's pretty good into like Dory. But like Dash maybe isn't as good because Dash can pay through a lot of taxes, but it's fine. It's fine there. It's a good card. I only run 2 because later we'll talk about Hypothermia. I have 3 of. Hamilton's list has the numbers reversed. I am probably not correct on it. Hypothermia is one of those cards, though, that's like really good for Dash because it shuts off everything. Unless they have High Octane or they pop their boots. And if they pop their boots, especially early, that's a big victory. And if they have High Octane, they have High Octane, but they're going to play it first. So it'll be a heads-up play.
Yeah, well, and I want to add, I mean, you have to know your meta, and we have a S-ton of Dash locally, right? So.
Oh, yeah. It was very well represented. So it was really good. It helped in my Dash matchups quite a bit, and it just does something in a lot of matchups. Like Briar, there was one Briar, but I was hoping to see more. It's great there. It's great into Viserai. It does something into every match that has like Go Again for the most part. So I like it because it blocks, and Blizzard doesn't exactly enable your game plan being an instant. Although you can play it from hand and create a Frostbite, that's really nice, and it creates a tax of 3. It doesn't block, and if they can pay through it, sometimes it's not worth it, whereas Hypothermia just says no, which I kind of like.
So how about Brain Freeze? Where are you packing that one? In
the
opposite, or?
Like, opposite, like, what do you mean?
Well, I sorry, my head went to the Hypothermia, but so you're gonna, you said, you were talking to aggro.
Yeah.
For Brain Freeze.
Yeah, is one of those cards that's really good into some aggro decks. Fi plays mostly 0 cost, so this card just strips a card. Viserai, this can strip a decent amount of cards, but like it's mostly Mauvrian's guys, or Swarming Gloomveil, but they play a lot of Shrills, they play a lot of other stuff. Kind of meh there. It's all right into Dash. But there's also a lot of targets it can't hit. Like they could just reveal Zipper Hit, Full Sweep, Harpoon, Throttle, and you go, oh, okay, that's it. So it's okay there, but it's better into Fi and Briar because those two decks are red lines. It blocks 3, so it can come in certain matchups where you want to have more block 3s. Like I would run it into Guardian, and I would never expect to play it, but I mean, unless maybe I wanted to trigger a chill at instant speed. I mean, that's a possibility, but like it blocks 3 is a really great angle for it, and it's good into certain matchups. Honestly, that's a card you might consider looking at different avenues for if Fi isn't super locally represented for you. It should be though, but it's probably a lower power than it's been for some of its life. Moving on, Channel the Bleak Expanse. I kind of talked about this. It's a silver bullet, and I typically don't like silver bullet cards, but it hits so many of the important matchups right now that I felt like I could get away with playing it. It hits Lexi, who might show up. There were rumblings of that. They ended up not really showing up in mass. They were like 2 of them. But if Lexi shows up, they play Art of War and they play 3 of a Kind, and this stops both of those cards, which is great. Fi plays Belittle, which this stops, which is great. Important to note that you cannot stop Mask of the Pouncing Lynx with Channel the Bleak Expanse because the way the triggers are stacked, once they declare that they are going to search for it and the mask breaks, you can no longer respond to them searching. You can only respond when the mask creates a triggered layer and they get to choose. So you can say before they decide to get to choose, but afterwards they don't. But like being able to stop Belittle from searching is really huge. And if you're not familiar, if people watching aren't familiar with the interaction, how that works is they go to play Belittle, paying the cost for resources and paying the cost for showing you a 3 power or less attack. Those are costs. That fulfills the requirements. Before the card resolves, you respond with Channel the Bleak Expanse. Now, the card resolution is where they get their Minnowism. It is not part of the cost. So you get to respond before that text comes into effect, stopping them from getting the Minnowism. Because Bleak Expanse says heroes can't search, draw, or reveal. It's really good into Rhinar, was like one of the most represented decks at our ProQuest, which was really nice because it stops Blood Rush Bellows, which is absolutely one of the ways they win the game. And it's, yeah, I mean, just those few decks alone, it's, and Briar. If Briar shows up and they're playing like Crown of Providence, not Providence, the
Dominion.
new card, Dominion.
Yeah.
They're playing Crown of Dominion cash out. This just stops them because an interesting interaction with that I learned talking with Jesse a week or 2 ago, Jesse from the Fab Foundry team was pointing out to me that cash out reads that you are replacing the cost. So if there's a Frostbite in existence taxing the resource cost, cash in says you can ignore the resource cost completely, which Frostbite is like a part of. So the gold breaking is an alternate cost, meaning that they can just say, nice Frostbite, I'm still going to break it and draw 2 cards.
And the Frostbite pops in that case too, right?
Right, because, you're fulfilling the cost of like playing or activating.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's a little bit of like a cheeky play Briar can do, but like Channel the Bleak Expanse just says like, nice cash in, cash out. It's not going to resolve. I mean, it resolves, you just don't get anything out of it. Or if they play Tome of Harvest, that's really rude. Briar tries a lot of cards. It's just rude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then the classic Force of Nature draws, right? So. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And your mileage may vary on this card. It's like one that I put in, and like I'll be honest with you, having one means it has to line up perfectly in the game. And that's kind of a bit of a trap, having only one of the card. Like it lined up for me in my last game, but that was the only time I really got value out of the entire tournament. So like going into this upcoming weekend, if I play Iyslander again, there's no guarantee that's on the menu. The main reason this card isn't like an easy slot into the deck is because it blocks 2. If it blocked 3, it would not be a question. I would just play it. But it blocks 2, and that's actually a pretty big deal.
All right. Energy Potion, I think, is clear. Frost X is clear. Actually, well, yeah, and I think most. Well, just who do you cite it in and out for? I mean, I think most of us understand, but
I wanted to make one comment before those on Emeritus Scolding. I only have 2. And that's important because everybody should run 3. I just only own 2. If I had a third, it would be there. There's no big brain reason. I
Interesting.
just want to buy a third. It wins you games. Then, yeah, Epot Frost Hex, you're pretty much right. I just want to outline, at least on Frost Hex in Ice Eternal, those 2 cards come in and out. But like I mentioned for Dash, that's one of those matchups where I want to put them in the deck because I might have to pivot to the plan. But into Fi, I'm never going to win off Frost Hex Insidious Chill. They just won't allow you to go for that. So yeah, they're out. But Oldhim is one of those games where don't try to force this combo. If it works, it works. But if you're gonna, you have to read the Oldhim the way you read the Dash. Oldhim can pivot from, like, Oldhim's changed. He's not just like a Dirtle deck anymore. He can do that. He can just be like, slow block you out. I'm not gonna let you play the game, or you can play the game, but I'm just gonna fatigue you. Whereas like Oldhim can also go, hey, I'm playing Stalagmite. Here's Macho Grande for 10 Dominate. And they're very different decks. So you have to sit down and figure out what Oldhim are you and how slow are we about to play the game. And depending on their answer, you either go for a tempo-based game plan, hoping to get some incidental value off of your Frost Hexes and maybe win off 1 or 2. Or you go, this is my win condition. I have to win off Frost Hex because you are just blocking everything and not letting me get damage through. That's an important distinction because Oldhim has really changed a lot and the pilots are very different. If I sat down across from Natan, I would expect him to go, I'm going to hit you in the face as hard as I can because I think that's probably the win condition. Yeah, but that's all I wanted to say on those.
Okay. So let's go over to the gear. Like we said.
Well,
Go ahead.
Winter's Bite is in the sideboard.
What's that?
Winter's Bite is in the sideboard.
Oh, it just didn't get highlighted on the image. My bad.
Yeah. I also wanted to make a distinction. A lot of Icelanders have cut this card, and I think it's coming back to where it's good again. And I think you might start seeing it again. It's one of those cards where like Icelanders have to find room for everything. And I don't own a Heart of Find also. I'm lucky enough to be able to find the room. And this card is good into so many decks right now because they're trying to be a little greedy. Like we talked about with the Belittle Fi interaction, this works the same way. They go with the Belittle and you say, nice, pay 1 or discard, give me one of your other cards. Your turn just got 1 card worse. It's good and that's on their turn. This card is so good on your turn. Normally blues, you think about playing on your opponent's turn. In Iyslander, this is one you actively like on your turn because we're talking about Scar for Scar being rude. If you've ever had like Winter's Bite, pay 1 or discard, your opponent thinks, oh, pay 2, stop that waning moon, great, go ahead, or pay 3, 2 floating, and then you just go Wounded Bowl. That's incredibly rude because they think, oh, I'm going to stop arcane damage. It's like, no, those 2 resources aren't doing anything. Just put a card in your pitch zone. Now, are you going to take 8 damage or are you going to give me 2 more cards and not do anything? So it's really good because opponents who are trying to get greedy with their plays, you can just say like, hey, give me a card and I'm still going to play my gross game plan. So it's one of those cards you don't play it in every matchup because it blocks 2, but into the deck, like I would play this into Oldhim. A Guardian deck, normally you would say, oh, they have a lot of blues. This isn't very good into them. On your turn, this is great because that's what you do. You go, hey, pay 1 or discard. They do it. Then you go Wounded Bull for 8 and you leave them for like, if they have Crown, they're going to be able to block with like 2 cards, take 2, have 2 in hand. But they could also just like not be able to do that and be left with 1 card in hand. And they're either arsenaling you or arsenaling and passing or trying to swing with hammer. And either way, you're probably going to get incidental value off of like whatever blue you have in Arsenal and your Waning Moon. So it's really good into those decks, especially on your turn. Winter's Bite is one of those cards that like that. I think that's the main distinction. I like it more on my turn than my opponent's turn because it makes their turn after mine way worse.
All right, fair enough. So the equipment, walk us through the equipment choices. Probably this one's a little quicker, but
yeah. So Alluvian Constellus comes in for Iyslander, Kano, and Viserai. Those are the 3 matchups where you get value off of it. You don't play it into Briar because they often are coming in with a Rosetta Thorn for their arcane damage, and they're only presenting Rune Chance every once in a while. And if they're playing Vexing Quill Hand, it's probably not that often, so you're not going to get great value off of it. But in the other 3 matchups, you're going to get it all the time. in the Wizard Mirror, you can you can charge your Alluvian Constellus by waning mooning yourself and then paying for Arcane Barrier. And you probably should, if you go first. That's what I did in my matchup with Jimmy is, hey, I played it on attack. Now I'm waning mooning myself and paying for it to tick up my Alluvian, because what happens in the Wizard Mirror is, well, Alluvian Constellus doesn't read once per turn instant. It just reads instant, which is great. Because if you have 4 charges and your opponent tries to go for the kill spell and it's Ice Eternal, making a whole heck of a lot of Frostbites, say you get 4 Frostbites, and you're able to tick this down twice first, well, that means your Waning Moon only costs technically -4, right? So if you have 4 Frostbites, it's free. Like, you just break it. You could have 5 Frostbites. Sorry, not 5. You could have, if you have 5 Frostbites, you'd have to pay a resource, but often you could find a way to have a resource floating. But it's that thing of like, how do you keep your opponent from just killing you on the frost hexes? Usually the answer is like making sure you can Waning Moon them and break the Frostbites using 2 Alluvian, 2 concurrent uses of Alluvian Constellus, so 4 total counters. So you really want to be careful with how you use those. When you're at a lower life, you really just want to sit on them. When you're at a higher life, you can use them a little bit, but like, you need to be careful. You'll hear wizards like not giving your opponent instant value. If you play a single Frost Hex and give them 1 Frostbite, they can just pay for that 1 Frostbite, take up their Alluvian Constellus. So just be careful. Kano's going to play that and Waning Moon into you. It's a good card. Anyways, Alluvian is one of those things that you have to like really be mindful of in the games that, in the Wizard Mirrors. Into Viserai, it just says, hey, my Waning Moon is like way better value than it should be. That's it. Let's see. Moving on, Coronet Peak is your head piece of choice into most matchups. It's really great. Yeah, that's that. Played into Bravo. Crown of Providence is literally just for Oldhim. So if we're talking Guardian, like Bravo doesn't usually run Tunic, and if they do, it's still probably better to just run Coronet Peak. The reason I don't like it into Oldhim, and the reason Michael Hamilton didn't and played Crown of Providence, is because Oldhim is Crown of Seeds. Crown of Seeds is really great in Coronet Peak because what they say is, okay, pay for Coronet Peak, Crown of Seeds, my arsenal goes to the bottom of my deck, I still have a 4-card hand. And it might not sound like an incredible distinction to have 3 cards and a card in arsenal, but when you consider like it allows them to play Fused Glacial Footsteps or a Macho Grande without having to worry about it, like that's a very big distinction because they're going to go for those plays. So Crown of Providence is just for Oldhim because it blocks and it can fix some hands. Bind Allspring Tunic. There's like, if you're not playing the Wizard Mirror, if you're not playing Viserai, play this. It's good. Ironhide Gauntlet. It's good. Stops 2 damage, you know. Hamilton plays Iron Rock Gauntlet for 5, but he's even said, like, if you don't have the room for it, it's fine. You don't have to. Iron Rock Gauntlet is just cheaper. It can stop snatches a lot easier, but, like, Hide is fine. Nullrune Hood is for the Wizard Mirror. Stormstriders is... It's Stormstriders. Yeah. I don't have to talk about Stormstriders. It's Stormstriders.
And Nodes.
You know what it does.
Yeah, Nodes is pretty
and Nodes.
too, yeah.
Nodes is for Briar, because they do play Arcane Barrier, and if they incidentally do Arcane Barrier 1, you want to be able to pay 1 for it. Stormstriders is AB2, so if they come in for 1 source of Arcane, say they play Revel and Runeblood, you don't want to have to pay 2 for each of those sources if you need to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So Nodes is important there. You played into Dromai because they have incidental Arcane damage. And having Reach for Dragons is nice. Sometimes you need to like buff your spell to go for 4 to kill like a Miragai or something else to just stop their turn. And you play it. I think other from that, it's just Wizards.
Cool. So, what's next? Are you doing all 3 in town? So for those who, because it's a video, we have a triple threat here in Portland locally. Within 20 miles, we have 3 events on different weekends. The way it ended up lining up. Are you going to all 3?
Oh yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to get into all 3 before they sold out, because pretty nuts. Like, everybody's just going to play Flesh and Blood. It's great to see.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Like, I'll be honest, like, I've always really wanted to win one of these things. Like, we talked about this earlier, and it's like I get the pre-tournament jitters, you know, and you're nervous and they're stressful, and man, I really want to do good, but I don't want to like worry too much about how good I do, because then it's like it at the end of the day, it's a hobby, and if it starts making you feel like bummed out. It's like, okay, something's wrong here. So it's that thing of like trying to balance how you feel about it and knowing that like it doesn't matter if I do good or not. Going to this next weekend feels really great. I was talking in the Discord earlier about like, yeah, I might just play Fi because like I played the deck a bit and I went, this is fun. I could probably just play it and do well. And if I went like 4-2 with it, that's good enough. I don't need to win another one. We're good. I have thought about playing Iyslander again, but like, I don't know. It would feel weird to do that and then have another result and be like, man, I scrubbed out. And like, I don't think that would happen, but and then everybody be like, oh man, he's one trick pony.
That's fair. That's a fair concern. You have to retire her now, so you can never. That's funny. Well, I mean, you can do well on Fi. Fi's good, so.
Yeah, he's really good, and he's not as like Fi is just a really good deck who's like not as linear as he seems at first. You can make cool choices, and like his 4-card hands are like really good. Most decks are like, I need a 5-card hand for this to go off, and Fi is just kind of like, hold my beer. I thought about Bravo for this upcoming weekend just to be like, I'm back, but I also don't want to show up with Bravo and just get like, oh, he sucks, just slapped around.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Well, that's cool. All right, so that'll be interesting to see if you take Gongai's this weekend or this upcoming weekend. So if you take something to Gongai and you get smacked around, and then maybe you go back to Iyslander.
Then I go back to Iyslander. No, I can't play anything else anymore. Now I can't retire her. I'm just an Iyslander player.
That's all right. Well, we're super proud. Actually, do want to give a shout out at the end, of course, but give a shout out to Jonathan Julian, another DC team guy. He took down his ProQuest as well. So that's 2 wins on weekend 1 for the DC team. For the DC team, old men. You're not an old man, but you will be soon. So good enough.
We're coming in hot. Well, maybe cold because it's the icy winter. But
yeah, see, you got the dad puns already. You got it going on. So, all right. Well, super proud of you. Thanks, man, for taking the time. I know this went long, so if you are still here, hopefully you learned some stuff. Josh is a really, 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 really smart player. So he's got stuff to share, and you don't want to sit down versus this guy, that's for sure. Not at a high-level tournament. In casual, he's a freaking great time. But
thank you.
And sorry, the way I said that made it sound like you're not fun to play competitive. That's not what I meant. I just meant he's going to beat you. That's all I meant.
Crap.
That's all I meant. All right, well, any parting shots before we get out of here? We're like right at an hour, so perfect.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me talk at length about this stuff. I really love the deck, and it's just cool to have it go well. Thanks for, I don't know, it's just cool to see all the other DC people at the tournament, all the other friendly faces from the Portland area. Thank you to just Trevor for running an amazing event. All my opponents were awesome. Even the people who I didn't play were awesome. I don't remember his name, but there was like an Oldham player who made it into the top 8. I didn't even know him. That dude was just so nice. Everybody was great. So shout out to everybody at the tournament. Shout out to Dice Commando for like, having a great community of people like get to talk about the game with.
Awesome. Well, we will see you in person in about 5, from when we're shooting this 5 days. This will go up after because we're not giving anybody secret sauce away during PQ season. But you guys know how it is. So, again, thanks, man. Say it with me. Go Commando.
Go Commando.